Do you ever wonder how to be your best self? Or better yet, what your best self even is? Girl, I got you. But before we get into it, I'd like to officially introduce myself. I'm ChristaTimil, and I help women like myself who are on journeys of self-discovery create space for themselves spiritually, physically, mentally, and financially. Welcome to my channel, in Praxis. Don't worry, I'm going to get into what that means and why it's the first step in becoming your best self. Gotta get my book out. Okay, so now that we're settled, the secret to being your best self is to know and work the process. And you're in luck, because today I'm breaking down exactly what that process is. But I guess I should tell you a little bit about myself and my journey. So I really started this journey about a year ago. I was in a relationship for almost 6 years, and there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the relationship, but it wasn't really anything right either, right? And I just felt a disconnect. But I felt like we were such a good team, and we really supported each other. We were really considerate of each other, but that just wasn't enough. And I felt like we were really on a different page spiritually, where I really wanted to focus on my relationship with God. He believed in God, but he wasn't where I was, right? So I prayed a prayer, y'all. Prayer, God is so real. I prayed a prayer, and I was like, God, if this is not the relationship you want me to be in, break us up. So at this time, we were living together, y'all. We was living together. I had moved like an hour away from where I'm currently living, where I was previously living, right? An hour away from the city. And within that week, God was like, oh, okay, you serious? You done prayed the prayer, girl, I got you. And he broke up with me. He broke up with me, girl, in a text message. But we're not even going to dwell on that. So he broke up with me. And so at this point, luckily I kept my apartment here in LA, because I moved an hour away. So I'm, in the Los Angeles area. And I had a job an hour away. So I was traveling back and forth every day for work. And I was like, God, I can't. Like, this is too much. And this is an hour when there's no traffic, and it's LA, so there's always traffic. So it usually took me an hour and a half to 2 hours in this commute every day. And I was like, God, this can't be it. This can't be it. And so he blessed me with a job where I was working from home. And so I was like, thank you, Jesus. And it was just, at that point, I gained a lot of free time. I'm not even gonna say free time. I just gained back a lot of time that was previously devoted to my relationship, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had no idea what to do with myself. I don't even know what I like, right? The whole time, right, that almost 6 years that we were together, I was just like, okay, well, what do you like? Let's do the things you like, right? Where it was a lot of times I was just kind of constantly doing whatever he wanted. So I didn't even know myself anymore. So I was like, okay, well, I gotta figure out myself. I started exploring things. I got really back into design. I really love design, like the process of design. I think it's the intentionality speaks to me, right? To be like, oh, I have this objective, and how can I do this best? In a pretty way though, right? In a way that looks good, that's aesthetically pleasing. And so just design always spoke to me, right? So I took that and just went with that, right? It led me into my little DIY passion, right? I'm like currently like flipping furniture and revamping spaces and all of the things, but that was a process, right? And so I'll talk more about my story and all about the work that I do. But what is in Praxis? There is a relationship between theory and practice, right? Practice with the C, right? Not the X. So there's theory is the idea of, oh, this could work, or this is how this works, or this is how this should work, right? There is some idea about the functionality of something, right? But practice is the actual work of that thing, right? Of how someone actually does that thing, right? In praxis is the relationship between those two as an intentional process, right? So if you have this theory, you're like, oh, I think this thing is true. Let me implement it into my life, right? As you're implementing, that is the practice. But as you practice, you reflect on it, right? You go through some introspection. How do I like this? Is this great? Is this not? Is this for me? Is it not, right? So there's some introspection that happens. And then the pieces that do work, or that you do like, or that like really speak to you, right? You integrate that into who you are, right? And you formulate a new theory, right? And then the process starts all over again. So in praxis just means that we are in process. We are intentionally in process, right? We're not out here all willy-nilly. We are intentionally figuring out what we like, who we are, how do these things combine, and how can we intentionally live into this life that we love, creating spaces, right, that fill us up. With that, there are a couple of, I like to call them spaces, right, that I want to be in praxis in, and I'm gonna bring you along that journey, help you through your journey, right, show you what I'm doing, give you ideas for your journey. So the couple of spaces that I really want to focus on, and they're big spaces, so there's a lot of room for us to explore, figure ourselves out, all that good stuff, right? There is spiritual space, right? I'm a Christian, a Jesus girly, right? I want to build and work on my relationship with God. That's something that's important to you. We're going to figure out how we can do that, right? How we can be in better relationship with God. Then there is the mental space. And I really feel like this is really like the nexus of all of them, right? Because if you're not in your right mind, how can you do any of the other stuff? But the mental space, right? Like productivity, just understanding our patterns, how we show up, right? And being really intentional with that. So we're going to have a lot of videos with that. Then there is physical space, which is one of my favorites, as you guys will learn. And when I say physical, this is going to be broken into two sections, right? There's physical, right, as in your body, right? I am on a wellness journey, a physical wellness journey, getting in shape this year. So you'll get some little sneak peeks behind that. But really, there's also, when I say physical, the physical space that you're in. I love a good DIY, so I'll show you how I'm creating space for myself in that. And then finally, because all of this would not be possible, right, without finances, right? So we're going to dive into some financial spaces, figuring out, you know, how can we be our best selves financially. So some tips for success as we go on this journey together, right? One, please know that it is a process, right? Sometimes we'll win, sometimes we'll lose. You know what? It's not a loss, right? It's a lesson, right? Sometimes we come on top of that lesson. Sometimes it's the hard-earned lesson, right? But either way, it is a process, right? We're not always going to get it right. There'll be some things we like, things we don't love, but we're learning ourselves. We're learning what we like. We're learning who we are. We're learning what type of spaces we want to create for ourselves. It's a process. That was my whole point, right? It's a process. And I will keep saying that, right? Because a lot of times we can get so stuck in the emotion of a thing. We can get so stuck in that, like, that current space, and just be like, this is the end of the world, or I'll never see the other side, or that'll never be me, or girl, you don't know if that's gonna be you or not, right? Like, God has so much for you. And when we're feeling lost, it can be so hard to see that, and anchoring yourself in the truth that it's a process, right? That we are in praxis. We're in praxis, guys. But that it's a process, and that we will continually be refined, right, throughout our life. And we will, like, look back at 10 years. I can guarantee you, you're not the same person you were 10 years ago, right? Like, right? You're not that same person, and that's how it will continue to grow and develop. So anchoring yourself in the idea that it's a process. To transition from being in process to being in praxis, this is tip number 2, is to be intentional, right? Because we're all in process. You're naturally in process, right? That's just the nature of life, right? Things change, right? What's the saying? Nothing's certain but change itself, or something. I don't know. But we're always in process. Things are always changing, right? And so you are naturally always going to be in process, right? So the tip number 1 was recognizing that it is a process. But tip number 2 is to be intentional in this process. And this is the difference in being right in process and being in praxis. To be like, okay, I know I'm in this process, right? Like, I have this theory about how this can go. Let me work on it. Let me start to implement this thing, and then I'm going to reflect on it, right? Have some introspection about it. How do I feel? Is this me? Right? Let me connect with this. Let me do more of this. Let me do less of this, right? All the things, right? And it's that intentionality that allows you to supercharge, right? That allows you to go through the process faster, right? As opposed to just kind of wandering aimlessly. This is the most important thing, is to be intentional. A lot of times we're like, oh, I'm not gonna write this down, I'll remember it. No, we are writing things down. We're getting real specific, right? And I'm gonna take you on this journey with me, so don't worry. I'm gonna give you some practical tools and steps and all of that, but we have to be intentional. Look at me, intentional. We're not just out here winging it, right? Because it's going to take us much longer if we do it that way. So then tip number 3 is start small. Start small. This is something new. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You're going to take some L's, right? Like, that's just what it is. But the L's, right? We don't take losses, we get lessons, right? You learn from it, you grow from it, you develop from it, right? It's something that is going to really help refine you and create the best version of yourself, right? There's nobody who does anything perfectly the first try, right? Like, that is not our story as humanity, right? You have to try and try again, and it's through that development that you perfect your craft, that you perfect whatever you're doing, right? It's how you become your best self, right? You continually get better, and each iteration that you show up in is your best self, right? But we can't do everything all at once. So it is super important to start small, right? I'm a year in on this journey, so you may see me, jump into a little bit more, right? Jump into to address a little bit more goals, but I'm not new to this. I'm true to this, right? And so I'm walking alongside of you. But if you're really right in a space where you're just like, I'm lost, I don't, right? I really need to figure myself out. I need to figure out what I want out of life, right? Who I want to be, all of those things. It is so important to start small, because it can be overwhelming and we don't want to be demoralized, right? We don't want to get demoralized. I keep saying this, and you're going to hear it all the time. It's a process, right? And so in this, right, in starting small, we have to even learn what our process looks like. Even though we have these like kind of 3 pillars of implementation, introspection, and integration, right? That's helping us balance between theory and practice. What that actually looks like, it looks different for everyone, right? And that's what this channel is. It's about exploring different ways to approach this process, right? So those are my 3 tips for success. But your girl's gonna leave you with the action step. You always, I'm all about the practical, right? Well, what are we gonna do, right? I done talked a whole long bit. I don't know how long this is, 10, 15 minutes maybe, who knows? But I want you to leave you with the action step. So as I invite you on this journey of self-discovery with me, I want you to figure out what is one space that you really want to focus on. One space that you're like, God, this can't be it. We're one space where you're like, I need a change in this area. I need to do something different. This is not me. This is not who I want to be. One space. And again, when I say space, right, it could be a spiritual space, it could be a mental space, a physical space, right? Physical as in body, or physical as in your environment, right? Or a financial space, because that's what we're focusing on here, right? So choose one space. That's your homework, right? I told you, we're starting small. Your homework is to choose one space. You're not doing all the things. Choose one space that you want to get intentional about and be in praxis in with me along on this journey. Okay? Okay. So you good? Okay, girl. Next week, we're going to be getting into the next step of this process. Right? I'm going to be here step by step, holding your hand, going in this process. So once you figure out whatever that space is, drop it in the comment and let me know what space in your life that you want to focus on, right? What space that you really need to create more room for yourself so that you can really be in the space that you love. Until next week, stay breezy. No. Until we connect next time, stay intentional. Bye.